it have started? Is it telling you that it's recording?
Not yet. Now it is. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. Can I just welcome to our meeting Charina Coronado, who's very, very kindly joined us to talk about her career in architecture. So I'm going to hand over in a second to Elen, who will, you've got a few questions. But before then, Charina, can you just introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of idea about who you work for, etc., and what you're doing at the moment?
Sure. I hope you can all bear with me. I promise I won't go over 10 minutes. I've also got some slides of the work that we do. So I've got my timer on. So I thought I'd give I'd start by giving you a little intro on my path to being an architect through to where I am now. So for me, my journey was both focused and a little bit windy. So I was quite lucky in that from a very young age, I'd say about 10, I was really interested in buildings. But I actually didn't study architecture until I was in my late 20s, what some would consider a mature age student, I suppose. So at university, when I finally got into uni and was studying, without doubt, university was an incredible experience and wonderful eye-opening events, etc. But I know now, especially within the UK and London, with REBA and the ARB, there are definitely other avenues of getting into architecture without necessarily going into university, what we call an apprenticeship program, which focuses on high school students as well. And that's learning by being within the practice. So once I completed the degree, I grew up in Melbourne, popped over here, travelled for a year to look at all the wonderful architecture. But since 2003, I've been working in the practice, Pollard Thomas Edwards, which I'll show you some of the work that we do. But to also explain one of the great things about architecture and why I entered into it is I just love the built environment. I love that we create buildings that do have an impact on people's lives. One of the most appealing things, I suppose, about architecture is, it isn't necessarily just us designing the buildings. There's many sectors that you can get involved in. It's not just about houses, it's education, it's museums, conservation. And then within these sectors, you could also specialize in particular stages of architecture. So it could be you're really great at concept design and the big ideas and the narrative, or you could be really interested in the craft of building and being on site and seeing it to completion, which is what I do. And then you could run your own business, or you could work for other practices, which is what I do as well. And then, of course, within the construction industry itself, there are many other aspects that take part and work together to build the complete building, I suppose. There are quantity surveyors, the contractors themselves, there's the engineers, you could not necessarily study architecture, you could also be a technician. So there are very much many other avenues. So I'm just going to show you some slides of the work that we do. Bear with me whilst I share. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So I thought I'd just start off with a mantra that we have at PTE, and it was certainly something that drew me to the practice, which is architecture can lift everyday places out of the ordinary. These are just some images of the residents of the buildings that we have designed and built, and students as well. These are some of the sectors we work with on that I mentioned earlier. So we do third age housing, workplace, education, leisure and retail. And I thought I'd just highlight this. This is from one of the residents of the buildings that we work on. And it's for us, or for me in particular, and also pretty much for a lot of us, we specialise in housing in the practice, as well as working at other sectors. And I really love this. It's what gets us up in the morning. I'll just read it out. So I've met lots of new people and made new friendships. I have only been here 3 months, but I can honestly say my life has changed hugely. I'm happier now than I have been in ages. And that just kind of makes you go, "Whoa." Yeah. Moving forward, we do urban apartments and housing, family houses. I won't read all of the notes. Workspace, education, leisure and retail, estate regeneration, research and innovation. So we also publish a lot of work on a variety of topics that you can see there. And then I thought I'd take you through the stages of architecture that go from planning through to construction. This is a particular project I'm working on. So on the left, this is a CGI of a project in Tottenham Hale in London. These are produced as part of planning to visualize obviously the end building. And on the right is the constructed building. And that was taken a few months ago, and that's due for completion in about a month's time. These are planning drawings, which are created specifically to demonstrate the massing and the scale and the materials that are used. These are tender drawings. So these are produced in order to allow the contractor to give costs for the project. These are construction plans, so you can see there's quite a lot of level of detail there, how it's constructed. It allows for the contractor to set the building out, through to elevations, and you can see there's a greater level of detail on the drawings that I showed you for the planning. Then we go through to details, and this is how the brickwork is set out. 1 to 5 details, again, how the contractor can build it. To my favorite part of architecture, I just love building, and I love going on site, and I love working collaboratively with everybody, trying to ensure that the way we're building it is the best way. So this is kind of one of my favorite photos of this building. And then I'd kind of show you projects that I definitely have not worked on, but I just love. So a lot of the projects we've shown you at PTE is very, very rectilinear, etc. Very square. But these are some other projects where you can be incredibly inventive. It doesn't have to be straight, but the critical and important element of architecture is that you have the concept design, the big idea, the narrative, and then the area that I do, which is then building it and for all the world to see and experience. And then you get to work in a really lovely office, and that's it for me.
Fantastic, thank you very much. It was really lovely to see the range. It made me sort of realise the range of different types of projects there are. So right through the, as you said, sort of business, retail space, the housing as well, and to think about the impact that it has on people's lives, because actually it does, doesn't it? It's easy to sort of take that a bit for granted when you're just using a building, but actually it makes a massive difference. When you've got a new one, you really notice, don't you, if it's well designed for what you want. Just from what you said, there's just a couple of questions, and one was, can I just ask if you could just elaborate on what REBA is and what ARB is when you're talking about the apprenticeships?
Yes, sure. Apologies. So REBA is the Royal Institute of British Architects, and that is an organisation that basically all of us architects refer to, who provide many, I suppose, services for architects. So they produce architectural journals. They will produce, I suppose it's like an organisation or a membership that many architects and student architects, you don't necessarily have to be an architect actually to take part in. The ARB, I was going to say the Australian, but it's not. It's the Architects Registration Board. Now, on the ARB, you do have to be registered in order to call yourself an architect in the UK. And most other countries will have their version of a registration board. That's what. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Yeah. Thank you very much.
We've got a few questions from some students.
Mm-hmm.
So what A levels should you take if you want to be an architect? Like, what did you take as well?
Oops, sorry, I'm just turn that off. So I studied in Melbourne, and it's really interesting when people do ask me that question, because you don't necessarily have to take anything particular. So, and I'm imagining it's going to be very much the same as here, because what it is it's going to be the same here. There's many universities here. There's the Bartlett, there's the AA, there's Oxford, there's Cambridge. There's many universities in Melbourne. It's going to be the same thing, because our universities were based on the model here. Is I took straight math science, but I didn't necessarily need to. It was the points that you, depending on which school, you have a level of points that you need to achieve to get into it, or it will be by interview and a portfolio to get into architecture. Each school will differ in their requirements. What I would suggest is, oh, stop. Sorry, apologies. Right. So what I would suggest is to study what it is you really, really are passionate about. It doesn't matter whether it's chemistry or politics, but that passion is what you'll kind of need in studying architecture. And then when you sit for interviews, you talk about yourself, it will come through. That's what we look for. Absolutely, yeah.
So you won't need A-level maths or subjects like that?
I know of many people, and again, I'm going to say this with my generation, apologies, but no, not necessarily, no. But it would be about looking at what the universities specifically require.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. So different, my understanding is that different courses will have different requirements. And if you're doing a BA or a BSc, so if it's a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Art, and some universities would say they wouldn't accept some particular subjects. So it is worth checking that out, and that might help. But exactly as you were saying, Charina, the idea that if you're not strong with maths, then don't pick a bachelor, sort of heavy engineering based course. That might not be the right thing for you. It might be better to go into a different course where the emphasis is slightly different.
Yeah.
So it's picking the course that suits you best, really.
Absolutely.
And by the A levels that suit you best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, nice. What challenges do you face as an architect, or what's the biggest challenge you have faced?
The biggest challenge. I think so it's been interesting I spoke about collaborative working, and I spoke about working with other consultants, etc. It's like many things of there being a kind of dichotomy or contrast where you need that, and I thrive on that, and everybody loves working with other people. But equally, as we all know, when we work with other people, it's not always plain sailing. So I think the biggest challenge is trying to ensure everybody working together holistically for the final. Our goal is to build these spaces and to build these urban areas, or whatever it is our project is. So it's keeping that relationship positive, I think, is probably the biggest challenge. But sometimes it works really well as well.
Okay, so you talked about like working together and stuff like that. So if students wanted to do an internship or something like that, how would they get into that area?
So that's where I wish I had. So we actually have a partner in our scheme that heads up, especially that, internships. There are definitely avenues to take. What I could do, because I don't know the specifics, if that's something that your students are really interested in, I could certainly ask her, because we're involved in that. We're definitely involved in the internship apprentice route. We take on every few years 2 students.
Okay, that would be great, because I know a few students have asked me to ask that question about internships.
Yeah.
So get work experience for uni and stuff like that. So that's definitely possible.
So are you thinking, I might be getting a bit confused. So are you thinking more like work experience for a couple of weeks, or internship to get to the point of architecture?
Both. So work
Okay.
experience and internships.
Oh, yeah. So the work experience, yes, we definitely do that as well. And we do the internships. So, yeah, I'll definitely let you know about that though.
Okay, nice. Thank you. are there further things to specialise in? So once you become an architect, are there branches which you can go off to and do special things?
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely. It's just, it is such a broad vocation. So kind of with what I was mentioning earlier, you know, you could have, if you wanted to specialize in the kind of concept design areas, that's brilliant. You know, you got the big ideas. You could even specialize more in the legal aspects of architecture, or if we wanted to even broaden it beyond architecture, there are so many different other areas, like all the various consultants we work with, planning consultants. Let me know though, do you want me to just stick with architecture? Is the question more about within architecture? Okay, no, beyond, okay. Because I mean, you can kind of, if you look at it as a tree, if I specifically thought about architects, I mean, for example, what I do, I deal with post planning and on construction. Then you might have some people that are really interested in post occupancy evaluation. So talking to people who have already occupied our buildings, and then report back on the performance of it. You've got a huge swathe of people that are really interested in sustainability. Having said that, we all should be, but there's aspects of sustainability that are really nuanced and very science-based. You could definitely specialize in that. You could specialize in conservation. It's broad, it's huge. That's the one thing I absolutely love about it. Because the other thing also is to remember, you might be focused in the beginning on a particular area, but the evolution of your career, sometimes it might take you in another direction, which is also really, really interesting as well. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that's great, thank you. So what would you say the coolest thing then, or project you've been part of?
Okay. This the coolest. So I'm going to be biased and say that I love everything that we do at PTE, but the first project I ever worked on as a student, and I don't actually have it. I'm going to see if I can find it on the let me just stop sharing. Is when I first graduated, the thing that happens when you graduate and you present, your work is presented for in the entire university, and the universities invite everyone within the industry, and they come along and have a look at your show. And somebody had asked me to go and join this one particular practice, and you know, one of the zany ones in the images, I didn't work on that zany one, but actually I should just share. I worked on a project in this practice in Melbourne that was very, how do I go backwards? If I can go backwards. There we go. See this one here? I worked on a project very, very similar to that one back in Melbourne. And I think in Melbourne you can kind of do these things. I'm not so sure if you can do them in the UK, but that was for me the kind of the coolest back in Melbourne. In the UK, the coolest has been, there's been two very, very memorable moments. And one of the projects was a project that's what we refer to as extra care, which is for independent living for people as they get older. They don't have to move, or but it was also, it had that, and it also had regular social housing and private housing. And I was taking some future clients around once, and I bumped into one of the families that moved into one of the homes, and he said, "Oh, are you the architects?" And we said, "Yeah, we are the architects." And he said, "I just want to thank you, and I really want to study architecture. The home that we're living in is fantastic. We really love it. How do we go about studying architecture?" And I remember just thinking, "Oh, that's so sweet." That's so sweet. So that's probably one of the more memorable ones.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
It does,
You talked about doing a presentation for the whole of the uni. So what sort of characteristics do you need for being an architect then?
Presentation as in, oh, I'm just trying to remember what it's, as in, oh yes. So Well, you do. You obviously have to build a certain. So how I'm presenting now, as an example, is not how I always was by any means. The characteristics are such that you do have to have a certain element of confidence, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to start off with that. So architecture is a 5-year degree, and then after that you do 2 years in an office, and then you sit for the examination to register at the ARB. And those 5 years, even though I kind of said they were great and lots of lessons learned, the lessons learned, a lot of it was in presenting work, being confident about presenting work, being open to learning, to exploring. I don't know why my phone keeps going off, so stop that. And obviously there's an element of you need to creativity, analytical, question everything, critique everything, be aware politically, socially, and being rigorous, I suppose. But again, it's not necessarily that I was always like that. It kind of you grow and you evolve and you learn. And a lot, that 5 years at uni was a really good lessons learned, growth. I grew a lot. Even though I was already an adult, so that's the.
So with the growing and that sort of thing, what would you say your hardest challenge has been?
Definitely presenting. That was definitely. So the way it, I remember. So I went back as a mature ed student. I had some experience, because what I didn't mention was I actually didn't. So it's interesting when you talk about what you need to do at A level. So I actually didn't get into architecture. So I'd finished 18 uni. I did straight math science. I had to get a certain, 2 schools required certain points. One school was purely about folio. I missed the folio bit. Well, actually, no, I didn't. I tried to get in 3 times and no. So I missed. I just didn't get the points, and I ended up studying something else. After studying something else that wasn't my calling, I then went and did an architectural drafting course, which is the same as architectural technician. Worked for a few years, went back to school, but I was a bit ahead of everybody else. And everybody was already used to it. And I remember somebody saying, "Oh, we've got a critique." And I said, "What do you mean? What's a critique?" So you pin all your work up, and your tutor comes around and they talk about your work. You have to present the work. And I was a bit like, oh my God. And so I really had to get the confidence up to just something as simple as presenting, really. And then interestingly, bringing that trains you. You do that for 5 years. That obviously trains you, and then you obviously need that in the working world, because you are selling your product in a way, and you really have to believe in it. And yeah, it's taken. Yeah, that's probably my challenge.
That's great, thank you. Well, thank you for coming on and talking with us today. I'm sure a lot of students appreciate it and learn about the architecture industry and stuff like that. So thank you.
Thank you. If anybody has any other questions, just let me know and I'll email them back.
Yeah,
that's great.
Brilliant.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Lovely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.